Okay, so it's just 6 o'clock and aware of time and wanting to be prompt and punctual and get the information to you in a timely fashion tonight. So thank you so much for joining our class of 2025 post-secondary planning webinar. I wish I could say it's nice to see you all. We debate every year if this is better served in person or through this webinar fashion. And I hope that you all are maybe cooking dinner or even eating dinner as you hear the information we're going to present tonight. I think convenience factor goes a long way. So I'm really pleased to be here. My name is Heather McVeigh. I'm the director of the high school guidance department here at Franklin. And I'm pleased tonight to be joined by three of our guidance counselors, Miss Abby Leon Murphy, Miss Julie Horner, and Miss Kate Ryder. We are fortunate to have a team of 8 of us total. The 4 of us will present tonight and the other 4 present at our junior parent night, which happens, as you remember, in December of junior year. So again, welcome. I wanted to make mention before we move on that for those of you who worked with Miss Leanne Soulard last year, you all received an email that we are very fortunate that she has taken on a new role within Franklin High School as an assistant principal. That is a big win for us at Franklin on many levels, but we are extraordinarily fortunate to have Miss Trish Gardner replacing her. Trish was a guidance counselor here at Franklin for 10 years before she left for a short time, and she's back. So the transition for Miss Soulard's students now to Miss Gardner is really spot on and seamless. So I know that those families will really enjoy working with her. And like I said, she's been here, she's done this for years. So a really seamless transition. So what we have in store for you tonight, it's outlined here in these bulleted items. We really want to talk about some college admission trends that we've been seeing. We're going to talk about the application process, the nuts and bolts of really what's happening and what you're about to engage in over the next few months. Talk about the roles and responsibilities of each person, student, family, and us as guidance counselors, and various resources that you will find useful. We're also going to get into a little bit about 2-year technical school options. We're finding that many of our students are choosing alternates to the 4-year college route, which is fantastic. Kids are being introduced where we as counselors are becoming more well-versed in alternatives for students. So we want to make sure that you're aware of those. And then we're going to talk just a very little bit about athletics and financial aid. So as we turn to admission trends, some of the things that we've seen, and really things started to shift in the admission landscape after COVID, during and after COVID for sure. And some of those have really taken on and really stayed true since that point. So I hate to say things have changed since COVID, but a lot of things have changed for the better. One of those is this test optional program that most colleges subscribe to. So it persists for now. What we are seeing is some of the more competitive schools, certainly the Ivies, are back to wanting those SAT scores. But for the most part, schools really are still subscribing to this test optional policy, which really just means that it's up to you whether or not you want to send your scores. And we're going to get into that a little bit in more detail a little bit later. But that is something that you will continue to hear about. Early action application numbers continue to increase. And I think it's important for families to really think about whether early action is appropriate for your child. There are really good reasons to apply early, and there are not so good reasons to apply. So Ms. Horner will talk about that in a few minutes, but certainly numbers of students who are applying early action have skyrocketed. Part of that is due to the fact that schools are test optional. So for kids who don't test well, they may be applying to more schools and more schools early because they don't need to take a test to prove their worth, if you will, to these colleges. So we are seeing that numbers of applications are increasing and the fact that kids are applying early is increasing. Colleges are really looking to diversify their student population. So colleges are reporting that they're seeing more minority students, more students coming as transfer students for various reasons, and first generational students are becoming more popular on campuses, and colleges are looking to really build their student body on those particular populations. International students are increasing. Again, I hate to bring up COVID, but that really came to a halt when COVID was here and a few years after, and colleges are reporting that they're beginning to bring more international students on campus. And I think for obvious reasons, public institutions are becoming very popular, primarily because of the financial gain and the financial impact that that has. So we're seeing many, many more students applying to UMass Amherst, UMass Lowell, Salem, Worcester, all of the public institutions in Massachusetts, oftentimes turning down some of the more elite private schools because of the impact of the finances at those public institutions. So those are becoming definitely more popular. I mentioned that early action applications are increasing, but because of that, it's very difficult for colleges to yield interest from students, and it's hard for them to gauge, are you really interested in this school? Are you just applying because you want to get things done? Or do you have a fee waiver, so you're going to throw in an application? So what we're seeing is that colleges are actually moving away from early action to some extent, and they're embarking on just early decision, which Ms. Horner will again get into, which is the binding agreement and regular decision. So point being, as your child is defining their college list and deciding where to apply, it's really, really important that you understand which admission policies the colleges are subscribing to. I hear a lot of kids, and we just started meetings this week, but a lot of students will say, I'm applying to X university early action, but the reality is they don't have early action. They only have early decision and regular. So it's really important that those conversations are happening, obviously here at school with us, but at home, I suggest making a spreadsheet and really just researching on the college's website which admission plan they subscribe to, so that you're really clear about which deadlines that you will be using. The essay has always and will continue to be a really important factor. If you think about the number of applications admission counselors are sifting through, they have lots of transcripts. Things look pretty similar, student to student, grades, courses, rigor. So the one thing that differentiates the students is that essay. So we tell students, above all else, they really want to put the time and effort into this essay. They are working on that individually in English classes. That will vary based on the teacher and the needs of the class, but that will be something that they will spend a significant amount of time at home on. Many have started it, many have not, but that probably is the most time-consuming piece of the puzzle. And so we really want to emphasize that part, because it is one of the, if not the most important part of the application process. The other thing that over the last couple of years has become more popular and has more weight, if you will, and I think part of it is for colleges to really get a better sense of interest, is this term called demonstrated interest, or DI. Again, with the number of applications colleges are seeing early action, they're really trying to sift out who's really interested and who's just going through the motions. So this DI, or demonstrated interest, is something that colleges track. And it was new, at least to me, I think to all of us, a few years ago, when a few college representatives came to us meeting with students, and they said there's algorithms, which is far beyond my ability to comprehend, but there are algorithms where they can check something as simple as, is X student checking an email that they send them? Now, what I failed to mention at the beginning is that I have a daughter who is a senior this year. So for the very first time in 23 years, I've done this. I'm doing it as a parent, which is very different. So I can relate to everyone out there. But I tell her repeatedly, please just check your email. And if there's a college that you're interested in and they're sending you an email, simply open it and click the link that they're referring to. So if you're interested in engineering and they're sending you an email about their engineering program, click on the link. that is one avenue that you are expressing an interest. The time it took for you to open that email, click on the information they were sending, they are tracking that. So we do want to reiterate that to you. And also, this has not changed, but social media is a big piece of the puzzle. And admissions officers, when they are reviewing candidates, it would not be out of the ordinary for them to Google a student's name or check on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, which I know they don't use anymore, so that's a bad example, but whatever else is out there. It would not be out of the ordinary for them to search someone's name to see what comes up. And I know teenagers do TikToks and they post videos and they post pictures. Now is a good opportunity for you to have conversations with your children about making sure their privacy settings are set so that their accounts are private. Like I said, that is something that admissions officers will repeatedly tell us that they are doing. And then the other piece I just want to talk about is really just reminders to us as parents. And like I said, this is my first time doing this as a parent, and I really have to check myself almost daily. This is not a competition with your neighbor, with your nephew, with your niece. This is really about your child. And it is really hard to not get caught up in other people's messages or thoughts or opinions. So I just want to make sure that I'm giving you all permission as parents or guardians to really just take in the time to recognize and appreciate this is about your child. It is not, their success in life does not depend on if they have been accepted to one college or university. Again, I have to remember that too. They really should be thinking about what they want in the next 5 or 10 years, not just what they want next year, not just the fact that they want to attend X university, but ask why. Why do they want to attend? What is that going to give them or gain them in 5 or 10 years? If they're a student that perhaps is pursuing education, they will need a master's degree. Where do they see themselves doing that? Do they want to get a PhD? And I think for those of us who have been doing this long enough, for those of us who work in the corporate world, I think we can all agree that when it comes down to it, most times it's where you get that higher level degree that matters the most. So I just really just think about not just next year, but where do they want to be over the next 5 or 10 years, and then almost plan backwards, if you will. And then we always kind of get a chuckle out of these newspapers or magazines that do rankings. And again, US News and World Report is one of them. I know most of us have seen that, or they don't know what's best for your child. So they can do some reviews, but again, they're not predicting what's best for your particular family. And again, this is not an assessment of your parenting. So it's really digging deep, having those deep conversations around what is best for your particular child. And again, I'll mention it again because it's worth mentioning. Really, it's an individual process. So this is not a competition. This is not about what your son or daughter has done who might be older, or your niece or your nephew or your neighbor. Like I said, it really is unique. And so if you have questions or concerns or want to run something by someone, perhaps reach out to us. We're, I think, a really good resource. Collectively, we have, can't even count the number of years, probably 70 years of experience. And we all work really well together. So what I don't know, Kate might know, or Abby might know, and we're always collaborating. So I would say if you do have some concerns or want some advice, please reach out to your particular guidance counselor. And if we don't have the answer, we will certainly find it for you. So I think I'm going to end there in just a minute, actually. So while tonight we're going to focus on the four-year college route and some two-year options, we just want to make sure that all of you know that we're here to support your child in any avenue that they're exploring. So if it is a trade or technical school, or they're looking for employment, or they want to pursue the military, we have resources. We've become aware of a great travel program recently that we'd be happy to share with any families who are interested. So it's something that, again, collectively, we are here to help whatever it is your child wants to do. So now I'm done, and I'm going to turn it over to Julie Horner. and she's going to talk about the ins and outs of the application process.
Everyone, so I'm going to be going through the application process. So these next couple slides can really be used as a checklist for you and your student. As Heather mentioned, we started individual meetings this week, and they're going to be continuing throughout the next couple of weeks. We posted an assignment in Google Classroom that we asked students to complete to initiate their meeting with us, so you can encourage them to do that. But in our meetings, we will be giving them a document that outlines this process as well. So you'll be able to ask them about that, and there's checklists and everything to help them. I know Heather mentioned it, but really just to emphasize it again, every student's going to be at a different spot in this checklist that I'm going through. So some students might be just beginning and others might be nearing the end of it. And that's okay. We're going to work with them no matter where they're at. So one of the first things your student's going to be doing is finalizing their college list, creating a list of schools that are a good fit for them, and really focusing on making sure they have a good mixture of safety and target schools. There's no set number of schools that students should be applying to. I'd say it ranges from 6 to 15. What's most important is that they're happy with those safety and target schools that are on their list. I think each of us have heard students say before, oh, that's just my safety school. I'm not going there. I don't actually like that school. And we really push back on them to say, you have to see yourself at every school on your list. If you don't see yourself, it shouldn't be on there. So especially for your safety schools, because those are really there. If worst case scenario, they're your only choice. The next thing that students are going to want to do after they create their list is think about what deadline makes the most sense for them. And I know Heather talked about this a little bit. There are different types of deadlines you're going to come across. This PowerPoint has a link to descriptions about the different deadline types, and I'll go over them briefly now as well. As Heather mentioned, early decision has definitely increased in popularity among schools over these past couple of years, and that's really to account for the increase in applications and kind of the uncertainty around who's actually going to accept their offer of admission. So early decision gives colleges that certainty, and it helps them build their class. So it is a binding decision. If a student applies early decision, they are agreeing to go to that school if accepted. So they are only able to apply early decision to one school. It's really important that families feel confident in their ability to pay for schools if they're applying early decision. Every school offers what's called a net price calculator, which will give you a really accurate estimate of what you would have to pay at that school. Students, if they want to apply early decision, there's some schools will offer early decision 1, which is typically in November. And then there's also early decision 2 deadlines, sometimes in January. Early action is applying earlier in the year, as Heather mentioned, typically November 1st or November 15th. It's not a deadline just to get an application out of the way. It's really for students who are confident with their application through the end of their junior year. And that's because our first quarter grades are typically not available for most early action deadlines. So they really want to be confident with their courses and their GPA through the end of junior year. Decisions for early action typically come out in December or early January. Every school approaches early action differently. Some schools will defer students to regular decision deadlines, which are later in the year, typically like January and February. But not every school will do that. So a popular school among our students that does not do that is UMass Amherst. So we always encourage students to be very thoughtful about which deadline makes the most sense for them, because UMass Amherst will only accept or deny from early action. They do not defer to regular decision. Rolling admissions is when colleges will review applications as they come in. So typically if a student applies, they'll hear back 3 or 4 weeks after they submit that application. So they're going to work on completing their applications once they have a sense of where they're applying and when they have to get everything done by. The most common application that they're going to see is the common application, and that's accepted by hundreds of colleges and universities. It's really convenient because students just have to fill out the main sections once and then they can send it to all of the schools on their list. If a school is not on the common application, they typically are going to have their own application, which can be found on their website. On the common application, in addition to that main section, every school is going to have their own questions that they want students to complete. We always encourage students to complete any optional questions and just view them as required. Typically, those questions are like, why does a student want to come to our school? Or why are you interested in the major you're interested in? And it's important to take time to really come up with thoughtful, specific answers to those questions. The self-reported student academic record, the SAR or SRAR, is becoming more popular among schools, I would say. This is when colleges want students to self-report their transcript, which is a little tedious and a little bit of a pain, but I think colleges find it really helpful. So there are links included in this PowerPoint to the website itself where students create an account and enter that information. And then there's also a list of schools that require it. Some schools that are popular with our students that require the SRAR are schools like UConn, Penn State, University of Delaware. UMass Amherst is a school that is strongly recommending it this year, so we would definitely encourage students to complete it for them. The college essay is a part of the application itself, and as Ms. McVeigh mentioned, students are working on it in their English classes. We've heard from admissions counselors over and over again that it's really important to avoid cliche topics like the big game. The essay should be about the student and not about somebody else. They want to know who your student is and what skills they're going to be bringing to the college campus with them. How do they work through difficult situations? How do they work well with other people? What are they interested in? What are they passionate about? Certainly important to help your student with editing their essay, but also making sure that the essay maintains their voice, because counselors can definitely tell when too many hands have been on an essay. Supplemental essays, some schools will have additional writing that they require. Typically, for most schools, this is going to be maybe a paragraph or two, but it is important that students get a sense of which schools require that so they can plan their time out well and make sure that they're allotting enough time to write those essays well. Paying application fees, that will happen when the student goes to submit their application. They can range from $50 to $100. So kind of ties into just being thoughtful and purposeful with their college list, because that certainly adds up pretty quickly. If a student goes and visits a campus or does an information session, sometimes schools will offer fee waivers. So that's certainly something you can ask about when you go on campus tours. There are fee waivers available for students on free and reduced lunch. So students can speak with their counselor if that is something they would be eligible for. Letters of recommendation. Students will have a letter of recommendation from their counselor, and then many colleges will require one teacher letter of recommendation. There are some schools that don't require any, and there are a few schools that require two. Many students have already asked for letters at this point. If they haven't, they can certainly talk with us about who they could identify that would be a good fit for that. Sometimes students will want to ask somebody outside of school for a letter of recommendation, such as a coach or an employer. That's certainly something they can do. We can help them with that process. It is something that is done directly through the common application where they can add that person's email address directly. Not every school is going to accept outside letters of recommendation, so that's something that they'll just need to check. We always encourage students to say thank you to their teachers for writing recommendation letters. It's not something they're required to do. It's something they do on their own time, and it typically takes up to an hour to write one letter of recommendation. So we always encourage them to thank them for their time. Official high school transcripts, that is something the counselor will be sending. Ms. Ryder will talk about this as well. What's most important is that we know when your students' deadlines are and that they're telling us at least 5 school days in advance so that we can make sure everything's ready and everything's going to get out on time. SAT and ACT scores, like Heather mentioned, many schools are continuing to be test optional, which means students can send their scores or they can choose not to. If they choose not to send their scores, then more focus is going to be placed on all of the other aspects of their application. Our general recommendation is that students only send SAT scores if their score is at or above the average for a school, and we can help them determine if that's something they should do. Another thing for students to check if they are sending SAT scores is how colleges accept those scores. Some colleges will allow students to self-report their scores on their common application, whereas others require them to be sent officially through College Board. So that's something to be checking, and definitely making sure that their schools are in fact still test optional. So I mentioned before with early action that Q1 grades are typically not out by the time early action deadlines roll around. With that being said, we do send Q1 grades when they are available. We do that in case a college wants to see them. It's really up to the college whether they choose to go in and download those transcripts. There are some schools who have November 15th deadlines that might be waiting for them. Mid-year grades, we only send if requested, and that's something we will be sending out to students after second quarter ends in February. Typically, if a student is deferred or they're applying regular decision, a college is going to want to see their Q2 grades. Auditions and portfolios are for students who are pursuing theater or an arts-based major. Every school has different requirements. Some will require that you submit an application before you can submit a portfolio or before you can schedule on an audition. So it's really important for a student just to be aware of what's required at every school so that they can make sure everything's happening on time. Interviews, some schools will offer optional interviews, and if your student is confident in their ability to present themselves in that format, they can certainly take advantage of that. It's another point of demonstrated interest, like Heather mentioned before. So we definitely encourage them to take advantage of that if that's something they feel could benefit them. I think that's it for me, so I'm going to turn it over to Kate Ryder.
Sorry about that, I was muted. Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about the responsibilities between students, us guidance counselors, and yourself in this fairly complicated process. So the student's responsibility is knowing and meeting their application deadlines. As long as they share with us what they're intending to do for deadlines, you know, the early action versus regular decision, November 1st, November 15th, etc., we will meet those. But they're responsible for meeting the deadlines on their end with submitting their applications. They are also responsible to meet with us. So right now we are all in the midst of meeting with our seniors for just individual meetings to get updates from them and inform them of next steps. And those are going to oftentimes conflict with their senior perks. So this year they are allowed to leave campus when they have a directed study, regardless of when the directed study falls on their schedule. But if their guidance counselor has requested a meeting, they are expected to be here and to meet with their guidance counselor. Oftentimes these meetings don't last the entire period, so it's likely they still get to enjoy some of their perks, but we won't be pulling them out of class. There is a meeting request form online in the Google Classroom for your student. Every guidance counselor has a Google Classroom for each of their grades. So hopefully they're a member of theirs, and in there they can find a meeting request form. That is something that we ask students to fill out. It gives us a quick summary of where they're applying, where they're at in the process. And if they're not applying to colleges, we still want the students to fill it out because on the second page, it talks about trade schools, community colleges, and other opportunities they might be pursuing aside from the four-year college path. So all students should fill out the form, and those are the students that are going to be prioritized when we're setting up our meetings with our students. Another things your students will need to be doing a little bit closer typically to when they're applying to schools is requesting transcripts and Naviance. So once they know for sure when and where they're applying, they should be requesting transcripts, and Naviance is the college and career planning platform that we use. I'll go into it a little bit more in the next slide as well. They should all be able to access it and all be a little bit familiar with it. But as Ms. Horner said, we're going to need to have those transcript requests in at least 5 school days before the actual application deadline. And again, I'll show some dates in a little bit too of what that might look like for your student. Another thing we're asking students to do is to complete the junior senior questionnaire in Naviance. So this is, I think it's about 10 questions, and they're open-ended and about the students' experiences in high school, because we all know our seniors pretty well. We've probably been working with them for close to 4 years at this point. However, we also know there's a lot about their high school experience that we haven't seen. We only know them from our meetings with them, what has come up in conversation so far. These questions really can highlight a lot of aspects of their experience that are unfamiliar to us and can help us write a stronger letter of recommendation for them. So we're going to write letters for everyone, but if we're able to have the context from the questions in that questionnaire, then our letters can be just all that stronger. So we really encourage students to fill that out. There are also college rep visits in Naviance. So this is when a college representative will come to Franklin High School and meet with students who have registered for this visit. It is more often than not the actual person who will be reading your student's application. So they are all assigned territories and they visit those territories throughout the fall. They make it a point to, get as many students to join as possible. So they get really excited when people register for these visits. They want students to come with questions and hopefully that eager energy about applying to the school. Sometimes they offer fee waivers, which is awesome too, but it's an opportunity for your student to introduce themselves to the person who will be reading their application. Likely they're going to be reading hundreds of applications, so it's a great opportunity for them to stand out a little bit. Those college rep visits have registration links in Naviance. Students can register for up to 5. They happen during the school day, so your student might miss class, maybe part of a period or a whole period, but they aren't marked as absent because we take attendance because it is in the guidance office if they don't leave the school at all. So we recommend students look at that, and they just need to register 24 hours before the visits. And then finally, students are responsible for submitting their applications. That is just basically hitting the submit button on the Common App, hitting the submit button on the private application. That is something they can do when they are ready. Ideally, they will have met with their guidance counselor at least once before they submit, but they don't need to be waiting for letters of recommendation to come in or letter from the guidance counselor or anything like that. They can submit when they're ready. And this includes test scores as well. A lot of schools are okay with self-reported test scores, which means in the Common App or in their application, the student just writes what they had gotten on the SATs or the ACTs. Some schools will require an official score report in which the student has to go to the College Board website or the ACT website and pay to submit those official score reports to schools. However, like I said, a lot of schools are okay with the self-reporting in the Common App. So it's up to your student to determine if they need to send the official score report, but it is ultimately their responsibility to get those scores to their schools if they choose to send them. So this again is talking a bit about Naviance. Like I said, that's our college and career planning platform. We use it a lot during their junior and senior year. So when students are logging into Naviance, they can access it from an app on their browser. So they probably don't remember their password that was created their sophomore year or freshman year, but hopefully they remember that if they go into the Google browser, there's an app menu, they can scroll down, there's a quick little button, they click it and they should be logged in. If they have difficulty accessing Naviance, they can reach out to their guidance counselor and we can get them set up to make sure that they're able to get in because they will need to access this. In there, they will be able to find the junior senior questionnaire. They'll be able to register for the college visits. They'll be able to add schools to the colleges they're applying to. That's either going to be through matching the Common App with Naviance, which is there's a big red button. It's super easy to click on and match your accounts. But if you're applying to schools that aren't on the Common App, you can add those in there as well. And then finally, Naviance is used to request teacher letters of recommendation. A lot of students put these requests in last spring or over the summer, but if they haven't already, then it's really important that they have talked to their teachers, like Ms. Horner said, but also have those requests physically in Naviance so teachers have a place to upload their letters when they're ready. So these are the dates that are relevant when we're talking about requesting transcripts at least 5 days prior to an application deadline. Sorry. So if they have a November 1st deadline, October 25th. And you can see the list from there. It does get tricky when we get into like winter break. So if they have a January 1st deadline, the 5 school days before that deadline, it's actually mid-December. So it's really important that your students are paying attention to this so that we have time to submit their materials for our school. They might decide over winter break, hey, I'm going to apply to the school. The deadline's January 1st. We're on winter break too, so we aren't actually going to be able to upload that material until we come back to school. So if they have any of those deadlines, they need to know by early to mid-December and communicate that to us so we can make sure all of our materials are uploaded on time. And here is what your guidance counselor is responsible for. We are going to be meeting with seniors individually, like I said, and in those meetings, we are a resource for providing direction, support, advice, information. We will help students create a balanced list. We're not going to steer you in the wrong direction. If you're applying to all reach schools, we will say something. We really hope students feel comfortable coming to us with questions because we don't know what they're confused about or stressed about if they don't let us know. We are also going to be responsible for sending their transcripts to schools, letters of recommendation, and other supporting documents. That's why it's really important that your guidance counselor is aware of which schools you're applying to and when the deadlines are. Because even if you're working with a private college counselor, we are the ones responsible for sending those materials. So regardless of what you're doing on your own, maybe your student is really independent or they're working with that private counselor and they feel like they don't really need the resources, that guidance, we still need to meet with them because we have a responsibility to their application as well. And then finally, this is what parents are responsible for. So really, you guys have a big burden here. I'm sure it's so challenging watching and helping your students with this really monumental decision-making process. And they are still kids. They are still your kids. So they're going to need that emotional support. It's stressful for them. They're young, they're making really big decisions, and there's a lot that we're asking of them. So having that support at home is really important. Also, the reality checks. Sometimes students might get caught up in the marketing of a school or, what they're seeing and what they envision for themselves on the campus. And they might not see the reality of the financial aspects of it or the reality of they're likely to be admitted. So while we can have some of those conversations in school, it's really important that you're also having those conversations at home. Having regular reminders can be really helpful too. Again, we are trying to make sure that they are on the same right path and submitting things when they need to, but you are going to see them a lot more. So being able to remind them of their responsibilities, their upcoming deadlines, as much as you can while still being, supportive, is going to be helpful. And then the honest communication, that kind of ties in with everything else here, is just trying to be on the same page with your student, but also transparent about what's possible, what makes sense, and their vision for themselves hopefully aligns with what you guys can help them bring to reality. And then finally here we have a link. When you guys have access to this presentation, you'll be able to click on this. It's also posted on our website for the school. It's the parent brag sheet. This is not mandatory, but it does help guidance counselors have an even fuller picture of your student. So it's, again, a worksheet with some questions that you can answer just about your student's experience throughout high school and things that we might not know from our interactions just as guidance counselors. All right, and now I'm going to pass it off to Miss Leon Murphy.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ryder. So now what we're going to do is we're going to be talking briefly about athletics and academic eligibility with Division I and Division II sports, with the focus on sports. They're the National Collegiate Athletic Association, so the NCAA. So at this point, your student should have registered on the NCAA site if they are thinking of playing a D1 or D2 sport. So at this point, they probably have a good idea of where they may want to be playing if they're thinking D1 or D2. So on the NCAA site, there is detailed information related to the recruiting process. There are the academic requirements listed on the slideshow. And then if you go to the website too, they give you more information about the national letter of intent. So the final stage of the recruiting process. So with collegiate sports, athletic scholarships are awarded for the D1 and D2 level. There is also information about D3. One important reminder for those of you who have students who are going to be playing at the D1 and D2 level, we have to upload transcripts to the NCAA. So please just remind your student to make sure they have that request in on Naviance for their transcript to be sent. So now beyond the 4 years, so we're going to be talking about some cost-effective opportunities for higher education. So Mass Educate. This is a very exciting new initiative through the state of Massachusetts. So this is where community college is free. So as long as you have not earned a bachelor's degree, which is where our students are at this point, as they're going to be graduating high school, community college is going to be free. There are certain programs at the community colleges that are not going to be part of Mass Educate. It's a very, very small percentage. But once you go to the community college website, you fill out the financial aid form, you fill out the application, you'll be able to know if that program is part of Mass Educate. So it's a very phenomenal new opportunity that we're given here in Massachusetts. And so I do have the link for Mass Educate there. It does give more specific information about what's required for that. So with the 2-year or with the community college programs, there are different opportunities. So one could be a certificate. So there are many jobs that may require a certificate versus a 2-year or a bachelor's degree. So that could be HVAC, like plumbing, maybe electrical work, right? So the nice thing about that is it's often less time of a commitment, and then you also learn a skill, which is very helpful. Then there's also the associate's degrees. So there are many careers that one could have that you could have an associate's degree for. So that could be a paralegal, registered nurse, a dental hygienist. So those are all some of the many careers where you may only need an associate's degree. Just some things to keep in mind: the healthcare majors, automotive majors at the community colleges, they may be a little more selective. I know at Bristol Community College, they offer a culinary arts program. So they do have more information about what's required on their website. So similar to the college, the 4-year college application process, just make sure that your student is researching the admissions requirements so that they know what they need for enrollment there. Then we have the technical training schools. So for instance, New England Institute of Technology in East Greenwich, Rhode Island, and then MTTI in Seekonk. So those are both private technical schools. Great programs. We also have here in Franklin, Tri-County, which has adult education. So that's great because you could take classes for cosmetology, to be a licensed practical nurse, for electrical and carpentry. So many different options, and it's local, which is amazing. Just some of the factors though to keep in mind if your child is to go this route are the travel expenses, the living expenses, the cost it can, add up with gas. And then also, for instance, the goals. So what are the goals of your child? does your child want to go into HVAC, right? So this is probably going to be a great opportunity for them. So another thing that, we want to make mention to is the community colleges. They're a great opportunity and they're not less important than the four-year colleges. So truly it depends on the goals. Another thing that we also wanted to make mention to is similar to our students who are interested in the college route, we allow up to 6 excused absences for shadowing a career in the trades. So between junior and senior year. So if your student is interested in cosmetology, for instance, if they want to go out and shadow a hairstylist, they can do that, and we'll give them 6 excused absences between junior and senior year. So they would just have to bring a note back. Now, if they are interested in cosmetology, but also potentially college, just note those 6 excused absences work together with the college visits as well. So it is a nice opportunity though. So cost savings at community colleges. So the Massachusetts community colleges and then the state public universities and UMass schools, they have an articulation agreement. So these are the 3 different pathways with the requirements and benefits for taking classes at the community college and then transferring to the state public or UMass school. And so, the cost savings could depend on the four-year school or even community college that your child goes to, but it's a wonderful opportunity. Another thing to make note of is if your child is at the community college, but say for instance, they may want to go to a private college in Rhode Island. There are transfer counselors who work at the community college level, and they work with your student, whether they want to go to a state public university or a UMass school or even a private school. So they'll work with you and your child to make sure they're going towards their bachelor's degree in the best way possible. So now we're going to talk about financial aid. And so there are different types of financial aid available. So the first are scholarships. So scholarships are wonderful because you don't have to repay them. Sometimes scholarships, they have requirements potentially such as grade point average, maybe a certain talent or career interest. Sometimes there are some writing components to the scholarship. Some scholarships we just want you to be aware of are the John and Abigail Adams Scholarship, and then the Stanley Koplik Certificate of Mastery, so the Koplik Scholarship. So these are based on qualifying scores from your child's MCAS results. So we'll know if your child qualifies for that in October, and we'll let you know about that. In March, we're going to be coming out with our local scholarships for Franklin. And so please make sure your child does apply to as many as they possibly can. In May, we do have a really special scholarship night. So for those who did earn or receive the scholarships, we do have the special scholarship night for that. And then also just keep an eye on Naviance because there's national scholarships that are updated year round. And just similar to our local scholarships, they have deadlines. So just be mindful of that. It may be helpful to schedule time to sit down with your child, just so that you can plan ahead with those deadlines. And then there's grants. So similar to scholarships, you do not have to repay the grants. So it's free aid. work study. It's where your student can work on campus to earn money to pay for college loans. Those are another form of aid. So those do have to be repaid, and typically there's interest involved. So you'll more than likely be owing extra money than what was borrowed. The amount of aid does vary based on your college that your student applies to. A couple of the forms that we do want to make sure you're aware of is the free application for federal student aid. It is slated to be out in December. Just make sure when you are on the US Department of Ed's website, you are looking for the 2025 to 2026 FAFSA form. I will tell you that website can be a little bit confusing. And so just make sure you do look for that specific FAFSA form when you are applying. And then there's also, and then along with that, they use what they call the prior tax year. So for your student enrolling to college in the fall of 2025, they're going to use your tax information from 2023. So that's just important to be mindful for. The CSS profile. So many of our private colleges are going to be using the CSS profile. It's through the College Board. This is expected to be available October 1st. Colleges, they'll give you a financial aid award letter based on information from the FAFSA and, if applicable, the CSS profile. And then we just want to make note that the financial aid counselors and MIFA, which we're going to be talking about in the next couple slides, they're great resources for financial aid planning. So if you have any questions, we do encourage you to reach out to those financial aid counselors at the colleges, as well as using MIFA as a resource. And then there's the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority, so MIFA. So on their website, they give you a vast array of information related to college planning, especially with a focus on financial aid. So they have several webinars, they have videos, they even have a podcast for information. And so you can really get to learn a good amount about the college planning process and financial aid. And now these are some of the webinars that are available. When you go to their website, you're going to notice a good amount more. But these are just some of them that are available. So we wanted to show you those. On the next page, so this one has helpful financial aid web resources. So we did talk about some of those. There's also finaid.org, so a ton of information. I highly recommend going to that. You get information about loans, financial aid calculators, scholarship links. FastWeb, I like using this one. It is a free scholarship database. And then, like Julie had made mention to earlier, net price calculators found on the college's website are going to be huge resources for you. So we highly recommend checking those out. And then the web resources. So Common App, we have the SAT and ACT sites, and then the NCAA site. So those are just common ones that you may be coming across and probably will. And now I'm gonna hand the presentation over to Ms. McVeigh.
Thanks, Abby. A lot of information, and I absolutely need to apologize. I was not a great host initially. What I failed to mention is that the webinar tonight has been recorded. and we will be posting it to the website next week. Additionally, we are going to be emailing this PowerPoint presentation to all families. As you may have noticed, there's lots of links embedded in there, so we want to make sure that you have access to those. So I should have mentioned that at the beginning, and I apologize. So you can expect an email either tomorrow or Monday with this presentation, so you can access all those links. A couple of just recaps as my colleagues were talking. I just took a few notes. Jokingly, but not jokingly, I talked about trends in the admission process, and what I really want to enlist your help with over the next few months is if you can please remind your students to check their emails. Ms. Ryder mentioned that we're working really hard over the next few weeks to meet with each student individually. And when they don't check their email and they don't come to an appointment, we block off a set amount of time, which means if they don't come, we've lost that time to meet with someone else. And then we may not get to them for 2 or 3 weeks down the road. So if email is crucial, if they can please check that at least once or twice a day. There's lots of other important information they may be missing, but we do communicate with them through email. Second to that, almost equally as important, is please make sure they know their passwords, specifically to the Common application. So just in this short week, a number of students, when they come in, they'll ask me a question about their Common App, or I want to help them match their Common App with their Naviance accounts. And I can't do that if they don't know their passwords. So it's as simple as having them put their username and password in their phone. They are allowed to have their phones in our offices, one of the few places they are in the school. But it's crucial that they know those passwords, because again, that prevents us from moving forward in some of the things we need to tackle in our meeting. So I wanted to talk about those two things, as well as just really understanding that this whole process will present a range of emotions. So I have done this now. This is my 23rd year doing this, and I feel I'm very well versed in the process, and I could rattle off information about the Common App and SATs and Naviance. I can do this in my sleep. But I also have a child that's going through it right now, and I was not expecting it to be this range of emotions, from excitement to the next day anxious to 4 days later complete shutdown. And I think, and again, I remind myself of this, we really need to just be with them in the moment, whatever they are feeling. And if you feel frustrated, or you feel that your student is behind, or you're not getting anywhere with them, please just reach out to us. We are a resource, and we're here to support your student and you as parents. And again, we don't see them every day at home, so you get the best of them, quote unquote. So please just use us and reach out if you feel that we can be of help. But again, just be prepared for that emotional roller coaster that the next few months will bring. And then it slows down a little bit, and then they'll start to get acceptances. More often than not, they're going to get more acceptances than rejections. That's kind of, I think we all would agree that students are pleasantly surprised with how many acceptances they get. But what that means is come April, when they're making decisions, we'll see the anxiety spike again, because they have to make that decision usually by May 1st. And so we see that anxiety peak because they have so many options in front of them. And so again, we can help navigate that process with them as they're making those decisions. So it's quite a year, but all exciting things in store. So I'll just end by saying that I'm really proud to work alongside my 3 colleagues who are here tonight, and the other 4 who are not here, but I just think we all work really well together, have a really collective knowledge about the process, and just encourage you to reach out with any questions at all. And again, I thank you for attending tonight, and we will be in touch. Thank you.